or good morning yet. I think we're into the early afternoon. So I'm going to preface the presentation here. Anything that you see that is ignorant, that makes you angry, that is inaccurate, it's mine. Anything that's very good, it's either from Insight or the Arizona Tech Council. So I'm the chairman for the Tech Council. I'm the CIO for Insight Enterprises. But what we have here is my impressions of things. And I did not come here with the intention of trying to out-academic academics. I came here with the intention of inciting thought. So as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, by all means raise your hand. If not, we're going to take a very good period of time at the end, specifically for Q&A, specifically for discussion. All right? So first off, thank you very, very much for having me here. Joe Strummer. Anybody remember the Clash? Okay, very good. You better. You're Irish. Not that they were, but. So the future is unwritten. Everything that you see on AI right now is either stuff that's already in place that people are pontificating upon, or they're forecasting something that no one knows what's going to happen. And that goes from everything from universal basic income all the way down to, Ray Kurzweil uploading himself into some system, which I honestly hope I'm around to see. The other thing to keep in mind with this, to make sure I have it go the right way, is we're going to take a very specific flow through the course of the day, okay? So beware the experts and current players. We're going to talk about operational adjustments versus strategic action, near to midterm activities, a little bit longer out, and then a case study. And the case study might not be what you would think. And then we're going to have an open discussion. So beware the experts. Anybody ever heard these quotes before? They're awesome. So my favorite one is actually on the bottom. I mean, Charles Duell, very, very straightforward. Everything that can be invented has been invented. Obviously, that's not the case. But the other one, this is an expert in the field. Can you guys read that? It's about space satellites and telephony, television, radio service, etc. They are the cornerstone of what we do today. And the reason why I call this out is time makes liars of us all. Don't ever forget that. I call out Microsoft here because at the time of both of these activities, they were the dominant players, and although I look a bit like Ballmer, I am not Steve. But think about that for a moment. I was in the room for this one. I was in the room for that one. A $16 billion business with 70% profit margins. That's on the net, not the gross. With 6,000 employees. When's the last time does anybody here have a Motorola phone? At one time it was so ubiquitous that they called them Motorola's. You went to Israel, China, anywhere. It was a Motorola, it wasn't a cell phone. Oh, by the way, I should point out, I can be on this list a couple times. Just reality, it does bite. And it was around self-driving cars. So what was just announced in Phoenix with Waymo? True self-driving cars. You don't need a driver. This is amazing. And I forecasted that that was going to take until 2027, 2030 at the earliest. Because my mind was on sensors in the road, which was the original plan for self-driving cars going back 2007, 2010, even into 2012. And then someone had this idea, why don't we put the intelligence in the vehicle versus theoretical rails on the road? And it changed the entire dynamic. This is great. And it's true. Successful people know what they know how to do to be successful, but then the whole world changes under their feet. And Sir John Templeton, anybody heard of him? Templeton Investments, Templeton Funds? Keep this in mind on every discussion. Four most dangerous words in investing are, this time it's different. How many people have heard, this is different? Last two times I heard it, the markets collapsed. And then it came back to not being so different. And this is important as we get into these spaces of artificial intelligence, we get into these emerging technological sets, the new economies that are coming, because fundamentally there are basics that are always at play. And we'll talk about those in a moment. Today, by the way, see if you can pick out the transition slides that were created by AI. These are motivational slides that were created by artificial intelligence. They're kind of there, but not really. If you want to get somewhere in life, you have to try to be dead. In other words, you got to die trying. Put your heart into it. A little lost in translation, but you get the point. So this is the state of AI today, right? There's no sentient beings. They're not tracking you down. They're not going to hunt you down. I might get these posted on my wall. I kind of like this one. So keep an eye out for the other ones. See if you can pick them up. Warming the frog. Much of what we see today, we couldn't fathom 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And what's interesting is there's shows that are out there that actually went through a number of these things. The ones in black, who here was a Star Trek fan? Anybody? Okay, I was. Surrogates. Who remembers that with Bruce Willis, about 10 years ago? Yeah? Electric Dreams or The Black Mirror. Yeah? You have some fans in here of that? By the way, I didn't realize that Electric Dreams actually is a comedy, British comedy, going back almost 20 years ago, where it was a love triangle between a man, a woman, and a computer, and now it's in a similar vein as The Black Mirror. Altered Carbon. Has anybody seen this?
Yeah.
I highly suggest to watch it. It's for mature audiences only. So that means you can buy a bottle of wine and have a good time with it, or make sure that nobody else is around when you're watching it. But pay attention to what they have in there from the AI perspective and the augmented reality and all these other things. It's very interesting. And I would actually encourage you to get a notepad and write out and see if you can differentiate the characters that are AI versus the humans and try to track them as you go through. Much of what they represent within that series is what Ray Kurzweil has been saying is coming for the last 20 years. I happen to agree with them. The timelines, I don't know when, but keep an eye on it. Down at the bottom, the gig economy, Uber, pick one. There's a number of them that are out there, from Airbnb, Uber, Lyft. Hey Siri. I was going to do something here and I thought, no, I'd be rude. I was going to have everybody put their phone on the table and I was going to call out and see if I could get Google and get Siri to respond to me to do something. But that's a virtual assistant that we're living with today. And we've actually become accustomed to it. When it came out just a matter of years ago, it was earth-shattering. People don't even pay attention to it. Now you walk out in your kitchen and you say, hey, Alexa, I need more pasta. Order it. And people are blasé about it. I'm enthralled. Pattern recognition, the stock market, casinos, law enforcement. So there's a lady I worked with for years. Her name is Tina Lamias. Don't hold this against her when I tell you the story. She lives here in the Valley. She's probably one of the greatest network administrators I've ever known. She's also extraordinarily astute at playing cards. So much so that she's had her face in systems in Vegas for about 10 years. She walks into a casino, they escort her. They treat her very well, and they make sure she does not play too much. And they kick her out. Facial recognition has been in Vegas for almost a decade. It's not new. You get into the UK, there's closed circuit television everywhere, and they track people going in different areas. We've been doing it with license plates almost at every exchange that you go through within the US highway system. This is here. And yet, much of the things that you go out and read, even at the end of 2017, within January this year, even in Forbes, there's an article about pattern recognition. It's coming. Well, yeah, pattern recognition has been there for a long time. Matter of fact, the most profitable joint venture groups right now by means of investment capital, right? So these are private equity organizations. It's all algorithm. There's no humans involved in the mix anymore. They built the systems, they wrote the algorithms, they kind of monitor them from a distance, and then they determine what companies are going to go in and squeeze. Many of your trades that occur are algorithms. We're living with it today. So, but there's this thing called market reality. Is this slide familiar for the IT folks that are in here? I know a couple of the folks. This has been around for 30 years. The only thing that has shifted is our ability to get definitive information. So it used to say 75 to 80% was keep the lights on, the rest was investment. What people fail to realize is when you innovate something, as soon as it becomes standard, it becomes operations. This is a treadmill. It doesn't shift. What changes is if you get into the government sector, and we were having a conversation earlier, those percentages go from about 70% keep the lights on, and that means you're just managing it every day, to about 90 to 95, in some cases 98%. And depending upon the government organization you work with, it actually might be 0 on the innovation side because they run in 10 to 15 to 17-year cycles. We just had this conversation. Why does this matter? When we talk about these big shifts in the economy and these impacts on the workforce, who's going to pay for it? Economics actually matter. However, these things have already happened. Has anybody here ever written an email? Has anybody here ever used voice to text, tried to use a dirty word and it corrected it? I've got a lot of ducks on my text. So those go through, this is all AI again. It's a very specific, minute form of bots that go through from the natural language recognition all the way down to the textual recognition, and they run against a query against a database and said, I think that word is spelled wrong. Here's what it should be. Viruses, those are all bots. The things protecting you are bots today. Does everybody realize that? You live in these worlds today. And this actually was titled The Transformation Beginning. I'm like, you're kidding me. That's been around for a long time again. So you got to separate the fact from the fiction. We've already been warmed. You guys get the analogy of warming the frog? For those that don't, if you're cooking a frog, I'm from northern Wisconsin, there's a lot of kabookwa there. So you actually go out and gig a frog, you catch frogs and you eat them. And when the thing is that you can potentially boil them in water, but you can't throw them in boiling water because they'll jump out. You put them in water and you boil them while they're in it, it warms up and they die. I don't know why you'd cook a live frog, but it's an interesting analogy. E-commerce, cloud, digitization. E-commerce. Anybody here use Amazon? Anybody here use Facebook Messenger? Do you know in 2016 they released a little program in there that you could learn to write your own bots with Messenger? There were 30,000 created in the first year. Anybody know, end of 2017, how many bots there were that were individually created on Messenger for Facebook? Over 100,000. In a 12-month period, went from 33,000 to over 100,000. It's expected to triple this year. We're living in these worlds today. They're not new. Cloud. 5 years ago, it was a big deal. Marketing loved it. Today, it's like, yeah, okay. Digitization. Digitization is actually enabling your environments to be able to use these types of things. It's taking layers out, simplifying the structures of your networks, simplifying the structures of your applications, so that you can leverage and utilize this artificial intelligence. The gig economy again. What's the largest employer in the world?
Walmart?
Walmart. How many people do they employ?
Over 2 million, I think.
2.7 million, give or take 100,000. They kind of got a lot of people. Those are full-time employees for Walmart around the world.
No, aren't they part-time? Most Walmart employees are part-time.
Correct, but I'm going to qualify this as we go into it. So for the comparison, they're considered full-time. So these are folks that are on payroll, they have an ID, they have a badge, they're in the systems, they work at least 2 or more days a week. Now, why is that important? How many drivers working 2 or more days a week does Uber have now? They just turned 3 million. That's why you use the active or the full-time. So they call it as an active driver. So we'll use it as a pair-to-pair comparison. So it's not an apples to oranges and oranges to apples. We'll say a pair-to-pair comparison. So it's at least 2 or more days a week. That's staggering. Over 50% of the jobs created over the course of the last 7 years fall into the gig economy. How many people knew that? It's staggering. 1 out of every other job. It's just incredible. However, what's enabled this? go to the far left of this, it's mainframes. The world was very much infrastructure intensive. It was driven by these large physical machines that had explicit limitations on them on what they could or could not do. The software had to meet the specifications of the hardware. That's important when you look at the virtualization, the gig economy, and AI. As we cascade this out in 2007, you get the cloud has broken onto the scene. Actually, the cloud's been around for almost 30 years. Anybody here ever used ADP for payroll? It's never been on your premise. It's what's called a third-party service variable by rate. It's 30 years old at a minimum. But you take this out, one of these fundamental shifts that occurred is the world moved to software, miniaturized hardware that enabled all these massive things to occur with what we carry around in our pockets every day. And then wireless. But it's really the software. We are living in the world of software now from a technological basis. If you're sending an email, you're doing Snapchat, you're on Amazon, you're on Tinder. I don't know how many people here use Tinder, but if you are, raise your hand. No, just kidding. Do you care what hardware it runs on? Do you care if it's Dell, Hewlett-Packard, Cisco, Juniper, Foundry? Does anybody care? So we've actually disintermediated the experience from the technology. This is profound, and there's no going back. We don't have to. Today, as long as you have a credit card, you can get unlimited compute. In other words, you can go create a company from nothing with a forward on a credit card and go compete with an established company that has millions in invested capital in their infrastructure, and you start on day one and you can compete with them. Oh wow, that was pretty good. So, but this is a big deal. We had this conversation at lunch as well. Technology is way ahead of the curve. We are starting to catch up with it. That's why built into all the bots you're dealing with right now, all the artificial intelligence you're interacting with today, it's there. We're just figuring out what we can do with it. Matter of fact, Amazon, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft AWS, Oracle Cloud, SAP, in their cloud environments, again, you can spin it up with a credit card, you can get more detailed analytical services, even artificial intelligence services today, than are available for NASA. Why? NASA has got this unbelievable technical debt, this anchor of legacy past they're dealing with, and they're on government funding, and. Look at what happened with SpaceX. It's incredible. They took algorithms that were built by NASA in years past. They're automated, they're running on their own, and they're sending stuff into space. The coolest thing for me was watching the booster rockets come down and landing. It was incredible. That's real today, folks. But if you look at the difference between technology, people, the technology's there first, then we start goofing with it, and then a couple years later it'll cascade into the workplace, right? I'm waiting, I actually just challenged our internal team to go through and look about doing a voice-enabled or a smart-enabled conference room. You walk in and say, oh, what's a good name? I don't want Siri, I don't want Cortana. Fabriella, right? Whatever, pick a good one. Projector up. Presentation number 2, cue. And you just do it on voice activation. You can do it today. You can do it in your homes today. But it's going to catch up into the office in the next year or so. Public policy, totally different discussion. We have people that fundamentally don't understand technology, that fundamentally don't understand the criticality of a business nature, that are determining what is or is not feasible for healthcare, for insurance, for cars, for manufacturing. That's profound, and that's something that all of us have to figure out how to address and push, because you can have the greatest technology in the world, very fluent individuals know how to utilize it, businesses on the verge of embracing it, but if the policy is not in place to allow it, like Waymo, very, very easily, Arizona could have said, nope, you're not doing it. The technology's there, it's viable. And it's a beautiful thing that happened here in our home state. Does this make sense to everybody? It's catching up. The wave's already passed us. We're chasing it. Near to midterm. This is a good one. You guys pick this one out? Before inspiration comes the slaughter. That was great. I'm very inspired by this one. Anybody want to picture that? I saw a couple cameras come out. It should have jaws behind it. Yeah, that's right. Market reality. It is still the reality. It doesn't shift when you move forward. You still have to deal with this technical debt. You still have to deal with keeping the lights on. And oh, by the way, all the artificial intelligence that we're implementing right now, it's now run rate, as we would call it in a business vernacular. It's now part of keeping the lights on. It's not innovation. So I love it when marketing throws these slides out. We have to shift more to innovation. Mathematically, it doesn't work. When you innovate something and then you adopt it as a standard, it becomes part of daily operations, which means it's keeping the lights on. You guys follow that? And for government, again, it could be less than 3% of your budget is available for innovation. For new companies, it's a much higher number because everything you're doing is innovative. Anybody get the picture in the middle?
Need a bigger boat.
Oh. There we go. It's people. Anybody know this movie? If you don't, go watch it. Get a bottle of wine. There's a theme here. But if you go back, the one thing that can be adjusted within this number in the short term is people. That's why the big push for automation. The majority of the issues you run into from a failure rate in any business, human related. Has anybody ever heard of a thing called a virus or a phishing attack or cybercrime? Guess what opens the door to allow that to happen in, it's roughly 94% of the cases? People. You can have all the technology in the world. If your people aren't trained, educated, and capable, you have big problems. You need to have the technology, but you better have your people squared away. Guess where most errors come from in an engineering environment? People. Guess who gets in more accidents? People or driverless cars? People. There's a common theme. It's not just the wine. So it starts with people. So the big push in the interim is to disintermediate the number one causes of issues. It's actually not to take the dollars out of headcount, but by putting these bots, by putting these automated technologies in place, you are. It is an after effect. And you have to keep in mind, I use the Soylent Green intentionally because, one, I think it's funny, but it's not just people, it's delicious. It's addictive for people in the business sense. When you're in a push in a company, how many people here are in the private sector? Okay, so a very, very good amount. What happens when revenues and profits are down and you're getting ready to do reporting? You freeze headcount, you stop training, you might let people go, you accelerate retirements, right? It's addictive from a business perspective because you can quickly make adjustments on your bottom line. This is something the public side, governmental side, doesn't understand. Anybody that's been on the business side for an extended period of time, you know when the company's not performing, regardless of the culture of the company, you get kind of nervous when people carry cardboard boxes around. Yes or no? Okay. I don't know if it tastes good or not, but it says so. So this is what's coming. It's everything as a service. It's already occurring. And if your business isn't looking at it, if your particular organization on the governmental side isn't taking a look at it, be prepared to have massive problems. This is where you will see people lose their jobs in mass for the companies that are not looking forward. And I'll explain it. So, solutions expertise. If your business has been running on processes, or your organization has been running on processes that are 20 years old, that are documented in some paper book somewhere, where people are walked in and they do on-the-job training for a week and a half with an experienced person that's been in the job for 20 years, the world is changing very quickly. because you just articulated the perfect job to put a bot into to displace a person. Global. It's interesting. Governments are putting things in place saying that you can't use the cloud. They're a little late to the game. Hate to tell them. You send an email today. Do you care where the servers are at? GDPR, right?
Yeah.
The right to be forgotten. Most governmental contracts in the US and otherwise, in California, they're doing it at a state level. Information has to be retained within the state. What do you, really? We're going back 50 years. Remember my bit about the public policy? That's something we have to address in order for the technology to be able to advance. Everything's global. You don't care. In a modern technological environment, you simply just don't care. Legislation does. Technological, you don't. Technology comes, how many people here are technical? When was the last time you received something and you had to open up a network port? You had to do something with intent. Normally when it comes, it's open. You have to close it off. Technology by nature is meant to interact and be networked and do things on an open basis. People screw it up. Again, everything is a service. You can buy today. You can go today, you can get lunch, have it delivered here with Uber Eats or Grubhub, or whatever. Your groceries delivered. Burger King was one of the first ones to have a bot running on Facebook Messenger. You're hungry, boom, go pick it up. No waiting. Starbucks. We deal with this stuff today. It's as a service. You're disintermediating the staff already. Systems and scale. The big ones win. I talked about AWS. Talked about Azure with Microsoft. Talked about Google. Talked about Oracle. Talked about SAP. Between those companies, you're talking something like $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion of technological market. Just those companies. Most startups today that want to compete with those companies, guess whose services they have to consume to compete with them? Right? If you're going to go spin something up, you're probably going to go to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform. You actually have to use their services because they're so prolific. It's about systems and scale, and that's how you drive down the cost basis of things. Digital marketing. This is me. I'm over it. I don't want my email to tell me there's a sale at Cabela's on waders and a new fly fishing rod. They're reading my emails. I don't like it. And I'm actually backing off of LinkedIn and other things. I used to blog out there quite a bit. I've backed off because I've noticed a fundamental shift in how I'm being approached because people have bots running that identify I'm talking about a certain subject. Next thing I know, I have 30 companies, just like mine, that are hitting me to try to sell me something on that particular activity. Managed services. If you can get it for less, at a higher rate of quality, why would you run it internal? These are here. These are in place today, but over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, maybe 7 years top, it's going to be a tipping point. It's already occurring within the market. This one was pretty good too. Basing your everyday on science creates loneliness. I think the intent was something like great minds are isolated. Didn't quite translate again. The computer's getting there. The algorithm is starting to pick it up. It's okay. So this is a case study. We talk about what about the workforce. And again, my job here today is to get us to think and challenge and hopefully laugh a little bit. But HR is actually one of the places where artificial intelligence has a really good foothold and a great, great reason for that to be occurring. How many people want to talk to a human being about something that's personal and potentially embarrassing? Anybody? You get a bottle of wine again? It's okay. Probably not. So when you're dealing with human resource departments, or even when you're doing pre-screening for medical and other types of things, it's a phenomenal place to go have bots and other things run. Why? There's a set of policies and procedures. There's very, very well-defined documentation for most HR organizations. You have all the legislation that applies to how you treat individuals. That actually fills out to a neural network. The larger the database that's available, the more accurate AI is. Guess where there's phenomenal databases of information? On the human side, because we've written laws about it. But it's interesting because most people in HR aren't picking up on this yet. So you can read through this. This is a survey from last year. And you get, okay, about half say it's going to impact our job. Reality is it's a quarter that say it substantially. They're starting to say, wow, I get it. If you can displace lawyers and you can displace dermatologists, AI does a better job of picking up skin cancer than humans do. Use the humans to verify what AI looks at now. We're just showing an application that runs on my phone for that. I'm tall, bald, and kind of fair skinned, so I'm a little concerned about it. But you look over, how many people actually know something about it? They talk about it, yeah, it's out there, I hear about it. You go to conferences, there are entire conferences built around putting AI into HR organizations. Google it, you'll be surprised. And you take a look at it where they say, yeah, okay, about 20% say, I think it can replace me. That's your 1 out of 5. That's your canary in the coal mine going, something's changing here. I've gone back and referenced policies forever. My goodness, I can be replaced by a computer program. So this is just an interesting one to look at, because it's not one people would normally gravitate to. They say, oh, you got to have the compassion, the empathy. You got to, no. You got to follow policy, because the job of HR organizations, almost without exception, are twofold. Protect the organization, move resources into the organization. Then you get leadership and development, you get all these other bits and pieces that come in there, but those are the two fundamental roles of human resources organizations. Does everybody understand that? Did you think your HR organization could be replaced by a bot? Well, I'm not insulting, I spent a lot of time in HR. They could have replaced me with a bot. Again, already in play. We're waiting for them to come, they're already here. The digital assistants, Siri, Cortana, whatever. Automation. There are bots going in like crazy now. It's called RPA. It's robotic process automation. You can buy the packets, you install them in your environment, and they just run. Anywhere where people are whacking keys, they're receiving texts, they're receiving emails, they're receiving faxes, it's primed to be replaced. Digital twins. Everybody know what that is? Watch, altered carbon, or surrogates. What a digital twin is, imagine if you went in and you had a full body scan, and they keep that on file. So Cancer Treatment Centers of America actually does this without calling it a digital twin. You can do manipulations on that physical scan as if it were the human being, and you can test things based upon algorithms that are in place, knowing the defined outcomes of specific medications or specific treatments based upon your body chemistry. Everybody get that? Oh, by the way, you can do it with trucks and other stuff too. But you can do it with the human body. Now, is it absolutely precise? No, they're working on it. But there are things, again, when you get in to take a look at the structures of skin cancers and other things, AI is better than human. It's been proven over and over, and that's not even new. I think it's 20, 25 years old. That, oh no, it goes back to the 1960s. I'm the one getting old. Machine learning. Everybody heard the example of the Go, the game, AlphaGo. It's a beautiful case of machine learning, where a computer was set up without knowing any of the rules. It observed interactions that were occurring, had access into the rule databases, and tested and tried, and essentially in a 24-hour period became the greatest player of Chinese Go ever. But it can't play chess, and it doesn't know how to play checkers. And that's one of the things that are in play with these bits and pieces. They have very specific applications. Over time, they may broaden out, but right now they're very specific in what they do. Repetitive, mechanical, physical, and rules-based work is always at risk, and it always was. We go back to the Industrial Revolution. You go back to the cotton gin. Anybody that does work that's repetitive, that's rule-based, that's well-documented, those jobs are in jeopardy, but they've always been in jeopardy. That's why I don't worry too much. I don't say the sky is falling. I think it's because it's a creative side. You saw what AI did on the motivational posters. You guys feel pretty pumped up? They struggle with the creative part, and they probably always will. And there's a bunch of research being done on this right now where they're overlaying industrialized areas, urban areas, the different workforces at play, and there's a presumption that the urban areas are going to have less disruption because you have a higher utilization of creativity within those densities. In other words, urban areas have more people that use their brain, they're higher educated. I don't know if that'll pan out or not, but it's interesting. The bigger thing to take heed of, anybody remember what happened with Microsoft's? What happened? Someone tell me. Yes, sir.
Is that the bot they wrote that started grabbing a bunch of racist terms and Microsoft shut it down in a day?
Yeah, it became like the biggest racist on the internet in about 20 hours. So they wrote this bot, and it was self-learning, it was machine learning. It was programmed to learn from Twitter.
Wow.
All right? Regardless of your political persuasion or whatever it might be, a lot of people say some pretty nasty stuff on there. Well, guess what sucked it all up? And they had to shut it down. It was actually a fairly significant embarrassment for them. It was, and it's not a joke, it became the most prolific originator of racist profanity on the internet in less than 20 hours. From creation to like, kill it, kill it, kill it, please. So this is where the creative part comes in. You still need humans to go work through these bits and pieces, but there are definitely transitions that are well underway. I'll bring this back up. Does this look familiar? How many people are here from the business school or have a background in business? Michael Porter, On Strategy, one of the seminal works within business. So Michael Porter had a whole number of things. When I was in the military, we had to study Porter. The reason why is all militaries eventually have access to the same technology. They just figure it out. You steal it from somebody else, you replicate it. All militaries eventually know what the other militaries are doing. That's why guerrilla warfare is so devastating. There's not a manual for it. They're damn amateurs. Because when everybody's doing the same thing, there's no differentiation. You have the same equipment. You have arguably the same level of training. Arguably. You have essentially the same tactics, and you know the tactics of your opponent. What sets you apart? Creativity. Spot on. So the cloud, all these bots, all these other things, companies are going to be a race to employ them and put them in place. It's a race to the bottom by means of operational excellence. Huge scale is going to come out on a global basis as a service. It's going to be managed by somebody else. Many of these things are going to be self-learning. You don't really need a lot of human intervention. The human intervention you do have has to be very high level and creative. But it pushes all the costs down and increases the scale and the scope. It's economics. So what companies need to do at the same time, all organizations need to do it, public, private, or otherwise, is you got to keep up with the benchmarks. If you're running your own email server today, and you can't tell how much it costs you per mailbox to be running it per user, get out. Shut it down, move it to Google, move it to Microsoft, wipe your hands and have a good day. But you better be creating the future benchmarks. That's the differentiation. That's what drives things. That's what creates the next. That's the innovation. And people forget that. Companies and organizations tend to chase to the bottom line. And I'll put it this way. Imagine if every one of us in here ran a company. And they're all different, because we're all unique. But essentially, we're all providing a trucking service. All of us have a bunch of trucks. All of us determine that we're going to get the same third party to get our fuel for us at the same cost. We're going to go to the same third party to get our tires. We're going to go to the same third party to provide the maintenance. We're going to go to the same third party to contract our drivers. We're going to go to the same third party to do our weights and measurements and meet all of our obligations on a governmental basis. All of our costs are going to drop down precipitously in conjunction with each other. What differentiates us? Pardon? Service. It's the people. It's the thing everybody forgets. And all this stuff we go through, the only thing that differentiates on any of these things is the people. And it's what you're going to do next. If all you do is hit those exact same benchmarks across competing companies and competing industries, you're going to put yourself and everybody else in your business out of business. Do you guys understand this model? So your resources going in, your capabilities, you get something distinctive. It's a unique product or it's a cost differentiation. It's one or the other. And when they come out, you have value creation. But this is actually a circle. If you can't continually pump something new into that mix, I loved my company Motorola. It went from one of the 3 most valuable brands in the world, Nike, Coke, and Motorola. You don't hear it much today unless you're in government and public safety. Because they missed out on the differentiation and we focused on the cost takeouts. What's this from? This is me. This isn't AI. It's a Lion King. It's a circle of life. All this stuff will come back. AI is just the next step. We are on the threshold of a watershed moment as it comes to businesses, as it comes to technology, as it comes to how we interact with things. But the reality is, there's going to be another one. Can't tell you when it is, but odds are with the accelerating pace of technology, it's going to be a lot quicker than the last one. This was another one from AI, not me. I'm not sure what that came from, but I like it. Keep panicking. That calms you down, doesn't it? Thoughts, comments, questions?
Questions they want.
Yeah, so society. So we are a collective, so we all belong to society.